Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Director Watch, an Awards Watch podcast that attempts to get inside the mind of cinema's greatest auteurs, explore what drives them, and maybe we go on a few unrelated tangents along the way. I'm Ryan McQuade, the executive editor here at Awards Watch, and joining me, as always, is my wingman, my co-host, Jay Ledbetter.
Ryan, this was a tough movie. It really, as a straight white guy, made me ask the question, am I trash? Like, that is the question. I'm feeling like Forky in Toy Story 4, wondering if I am in
Trash?
Yeah. We're talking Carnal Knowledge. This is a pretty important one, like a low-key important one. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I watched the film and then I did a little dive and I was like, wow, this was like a big fucking deal.
A hot button move.
People were angry about this thing. And I mean, honestly, I can understand why, as we'll talk about it, and I guess also have a therapy session for Jay here in about 30 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Like, I can understand why it feels at the time in 1971 we're at the turn of the tide, buddy. We're at the early 70s. Movies are changing, and we're at the break of a
movies are becoming difficult.
Yeah,
challenging,
and people want to see this stuff in theaters, because this movie actually was kind of a low-key kind of hit, which is insane. But anyway,
very, very cheap to make, but
cheap to make. Yeah, but thought-provoking and interesting.
It was the talk of the town among the, uppity artistic elites.
Yeah, you think you would have paid a ticket to go see it?
Absolutely. I would have been right there, middle of the theater. I'd get there early because you couldn't reserve seats back then.
No. Well, some movie theaters still you can't reserve seats. You gotta, like the rep screenings.
What a crock.
You remember that when you were a kid, where you had to get there early and stand in line?
No, I mean, I still go to plenty of screenings, like at the rep theaters that you're talking about, where they don't let you do that, and it is an adjustment. You got to remember. You got to remind yourself.
Yeah, because you got to get there ahead of time.
There a little early.
Yeah. And then you kind of have to go with somebody to those, because you don't want to lose your seat, and then you're gonna get Wait, do you do concessions? Do you do a popcorn?
Not really, no.
No.
Most of the time, no.
More of a Raisinets guy.
I'm more of just I'm going
bottle of water.
Nothing.
Maybe our guest.
Me and the movie.
Maybe our guest has a favorite theater snack. Our guest today, because we're not alone. We're never alone doing this series. Is writer for Awards Connection. It's Andrew Carden, first time guest. Andrew, welcome to Director Watch.
Thank you. Long overdue.
Long overdue. I was telling Andrew before this, Jay. I've known Andrew for many years online. We know a lot of mutual people, but this is the first time I've ever podcasted with Andrew, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't, Andrew. It doesn't make sense.
It's unbelievable. I've done Kevin Jacobson's podcast at least a dozen times.
At least.
So you would think that our paths would cross on something, because often he has multiple guests on, but just never quite worked out. But to rewind back to your question, I'm partial to a blue raspberry icy.
Ooh.
Love an icy.
I do enjoy a nice raisinette. I also enjoy a nice Reese's Pieces.
Ooh.
I do enjoy a popcorn, but it has to be a small one, because it can just get a little out of control if I have too much.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like a peanut M&M.
If you're going for like a Reese's Pieces or some sort of candy, what's the strategy to make it not so annoying? Because it's always in a plastic bag. I normally pour the plastic bag into the box.
I know. It depends on some rep screens, because they do the box ones too.
Yeah.
They got the box.
Or the other option is you can put the candy in the popcorn, which is a popular trick that some people pull down. There's a melting issue.
Yeah.
And also, it kind of just makes
it doesn't matter for me, because I'll have finished it by the time the trailers are done.
That's true.
True that.
Depends on the movie too, I think. Because if you're in a longer movie, you need a snack. You know what I mean?
When I saw Nosferatu, it was a loud experience, so you're not really disturbing anybody. But if it's a quieter affair, it could be a little tougher.
Well,
like a quiet place.
If it's a quiet place and you go to a theater and you're with Jay, you better shut the hell up.
I yelled.
He yelled at a bunch of teenagers one time.
Yeah,
and those kids have been in therapy ever since. Much like the characters in this damn movie that we're talking about today.
I think they could use some.
I treated him like Jonathan treats Bobby.
That's not right, and you know that. Jay, what are you confessing things like that on the show? Before we get into Carnal Knowledge, Andrew, we brought you on here for our Mike Nichols series. We're so excited to have you here. But I got to get your thoughts on Mike Nichols himself. What about the director do you like? What don't you like? What about Nichols's films for you personally do resonate with you?
Well, I love that he did a lot of film and television and theater. I think he was a true actor's director because he started as an actor. He did a lot of stage work. He obviously did a lot of work with Elaine May on stage. I think he had a rapport and a connection with his actors that was pretty much unmatched. And he could capture performances from actors that a lot of other directors couldn't. I just look at Elizabeth Taylor and Virginia Woolf. I mean, that is, I would say, career best work from her. And I don't think another director, even if they are more experienced than Mike Nichols, was ever able to draw out of her what he managed to. I think he just had that connection with his actors because he just had so much experience himself as an actor. You look at a film like Primary Colors, for instance, that's an incredible John Travolta performance. And so rarely we're at directors able to get that kind of performance out of him. And often he would work with actors time and time again. He worked with Nicholson on many an occasion. He worked with Streep a number of times. He built these relationships, and you can see that the actors on screen are so at ease, so comfortable. And again, he built that rapport with his performers in a way that I think filmmakers who didn't themselves have acting experience weren't necessarily able to do. So, and I mean, he really, even his flops, I can find something to really appreciate. There's not really a film of his that I can think of that's completely meritless. Even something like Heartburn, which is kind of a drag, it's still watchable because he's able to draw some sparks out of his actors, even if the material's kind of subpar. So he's definitely one of my all-time favorite directors, certainly top 10. And, I think Carnal Knowledge, well, it isn't necessarily like top five necessarily. I think it's definitely among his top 10.
It's a very interesting film to talk about, and also just the versatility already here within the first four films of his filmography. This being the fourth film in his filmography that we're going to talk about. But Jay, we're not doing an episode. We didn't do an episode on his third film,
No,
Catch 22, which is I know a
his
movie that
his
you
great folly.
which is coming off of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Graduate. He had big high expectations for this thing.
Hmm.
You, Mr. Completist, did you watch Catch 22? And if so, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I did watch it. I mean, if you look at kind of the history of the movie, it was a bit of a passion project for Nichols. After The Graduate, he could have asked for anything and
It's his blank
gotten
check.
a lot of money. This was the biggest budget he got, I think, until Working Girl. And even then, if you adjust for inflation, it still might be higher. But um, it Catch 22 is like this sprawling, big satire, war satire, kind of speaking to the Vietnam War. The cast for this movie is unbelievable. When it came out, it got eviscerated and also lost a bunch of money. And I think it seems the reason that was because MASH came out the year before, and they were like, "You're not MASH, bro. Like, get out of here. Quit trying to do that." And it sort of started this really interesting quasi rivalry with Nichols and Altman, where it was sort of this comedic ensemble social commentary, who can figure it out most in the 70s. And I think over the years, it's pretty clear who won that, at least in that decade. But the movie itself, I actually think is pretty good. I like the movie. It's the sense of humor in it is extraordinarily dry, and made doubly so because there's essentially no score in the movie. So it comes off as being played super seriously. But I think the actors in it are like, they know exactly what movie they're in. I think you could argue kind of in editing, maybe it got lost a little bit, but it was really a disaster. Like, truly, It was like, oh, the guy who made The Graduate made this absolute nightmare of a movie that absolutely nobody likes and lost a bunch of money. And so we had to rebound. And I don't know, Andrew, have you seen Catch 22?
I have. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that now, looking back, I think that MASH is slightly overrated and Catch-22 is slightly underrated. I still think MASH is probably the superior film, but
Mhm.
I appreciate what Nichols was doing. It is this huge cast, but I think that Nichols has a hard time giving everyone something special to do.
Yeah.
He really just packs it, and some actors do flourish in it. I think Alan Arkin is terrific as always. It's great seeing someone like, Anthony Perkins show up. It's a terrific all-star cast, but I think it had the misfortune of coming out after MASH. And it was also based on this really beloved book that everyone had read and admired and had such high expectations for. So when you couple those high expectations with having come up off of both Virginia Woolf and The Graduate, two films that made so much money and were universally admired by critics and audiences, I mean, the bar that he had to meet for this was just so sky high. And when it didn't get those sterling reviews from critics, audiences were kind of weary of it. Had it had a smaller budget, it would have made money, but he had just
Mhm.
packed it with this massive cast and turns it into this epic. And by doing so, it ended up being a box office failure. And yes, he rebounded with Carnal Knowledge afterwards, but then you look at the rest of the 70s and you see a kind of lost Mike Nichols. You see him
Mhm.
doing films like Day of the Dolphin, which is a really odd film, and The Fortune, which is also a very strange film. So, with the exception of Carnal Knowledge, which was his one hit of the decade, the 70s is kind of a
Yeah,
curiosity
it's
on
crazy.
Nichols' end.
It really is because this is the time of the auteur.
Mhm.
And this feels almost like, when Jay, we talked about Sorcerer.
Bizarre that the guy who made The Graduate didn't have a big 70s.
Yeah,
Like
I
he
mean, it
kind of
is
kicked it
because,
off
Yeah.
and then just kind of faded.
but it
Yeah.
feels like he was a, a window into what would happen in 79, 80, where these auteurs would go big. Apocalypse Now being the case, or Heaven's Gate, or some of these films that then wrecked auteur filmmaking for a while, and then allowed the 80s and these bigger affairs to sort of take over, and a lot of directors had to wander through. We've talked extensively in the past, Jay, about Altman's 80s, even though we love some of the gems inside that decade. On on the whole, it's not particularly as grand as the 70s, or even that for
They also
Scorsese,
couldn't
or
find the money.
they couldn't find the money.
Yeah.
But he had this film, which is, to Andrew, your point, it is a huge novel. It is a
Mhm.
massive responsibility. You are making one of the most popular books of all time, and it is a vast text. It's huge. I mean, they remade it recently. I think Clooney and Hesloff made it into a Hulu series, if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
and to not nearly any critical acclaim, because it's also one of those books that's like no one can get it right. Like there's something about that original text that makes it so rich. It's like making Catcher in the Rye into a movie. You just can't do that. Like, and even if you try, you already are failing. And they spent almost 10 years trying to adapt it. Even Orson Welles himself tried to adapt it, and he couldn't
Mhm.
even crack the code on this thing.
And
And
he ends
so
up in the movie.
and he ends up in
Right.
the movie,
Right.
yes. And then yes, you're talking about MASH, and which was such a huge hit and really propelled Altman into this grand run. And the movie we're talking about today is one of Altman's collaborators on scripts, and I mean he is literally the writer of Popeye at the in 1980, which is really interesting. Once again, as Jay, you're talking about the cross section between what Nichols tries to do for just a couple of films in the 70s, but really just fails at it. And, we'll talk about Carnal Knowledge is probably the only success from The Graduate to Silkwood that worked with audiences, worked with people just in general. And that's why I think we selected this film is also too, because it's the only one there that has survived on any kind of merit
He
and
did
also
he
had
did
a
continue to kill it
on the stage. But that's the thing
Yeah.
is he
Right.
he was able to then carry on into the 80s because he realized that I have to go back to what I'm known for and made those first two films successful, which is to go back to the stage, built so much great cachet doing that, and then ended up then on a string of run or being able to make films again and being willing to compromise even while still creating his own vision. But Catch 22, a film I haven't seen in a long time. I did not get to rewatch it for before this episode,
Mhm.
but one that I definitely I watched it around the time we watched and reviewed MASH on the old show because I didn't like MASH nearly as much as people sort of revered it even now and then. And I do kind of agree with you, Andrew. I much kind of prefer this film, even though I still think both films are technically kind of a mess
Mhm.
tonally. But this one is just a more, much more interesting film for me than something
Yeah.
like
I think
MASH.
MASH is more cohesive, but I mean, I'll tell you this about Catch 22. It looks expensive. I mean, it
It
is really,
does.
they don't make them
Yes.
like they used to kind of
That's
movie.
like we're gonna give you a what was it a I believe at $18 million
I think it was, yeah,
budget.
close to 20. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, if you're gonna make this movie look
I mean, it's
be
got
like this,
real planes and giant sets and
and
tons of actors.
and it's throwing it all. It's a big swing, and
Yeah.
that's why we
It
can at
is a
least admire
huge swing.
and
Yeah.
can be very admire him for that. But this movie that we're here to talk about, Carnal Knowledge today, much more stripped back than that film.
A rebound.
A rebound, which is a really interesting film that I'm super excited to talk about. Andrew, for yourself, was this? I know that this wasn't a first time watch for you. I don't believe so. What is your relationship with this film? What do you think about Carnal Knowledge, and how was the rewatch for you?
Yeah, believe it or not, this is actually just the second time I've watched it in full. And the first time I watched it was in college, so you're talking probably 15 years ago at this point. But it's a film that I was always very familiar with because I recall my grandparents talking about it. They were really into a lot of these sex dramas and comedies from the late 60s and early 70s. So like Bob and Carolyn's Ted and Alice, they really admired. They loved 10 with Dudley Moore, which was later in the 70s. And they mentioned really admiring Carnal Knowledge. But I was actually also familiar with Carnal Knowledge because there's an episode of the show The Wonder Years in which Fred Savage's character, Kevin Arnold, is dead set on sneaking in to see Carnal Knowledge. He and his friends are obsessed with it because everybody's talking about it. They're talking about how it shows sex like you've never seen it on screen before, and how are you able to see this movie at the mall in the suburbs? And he, of course, manages to get in. All the while, his best friend Paul actually loses his virginity while they're watching Carnal Knowledge in the theater. Um, so I remember being introduced to this through both my grandparents' conversations and from just hearing about it through other programs. Um, when I first watched it in college, I was immediately struck by Nicholson and Ann-Margret. I thought that they were both incredible. Um, I had seen so much Nicholson at that point already, and to see young Nicholson like this was amazing. And it's such an intense performance. I was less taken at the time with Candice Bergen and Art Garfunkel. I thought that their material was a little drier, not as compelling. But now revisiting it some 15 years later, I'm actually a little bit more taken with the Bergen and Garfunkel stuff. I think they're doing really fine work here. And I still am really won over by Nicholson and what Ann-Margret's doing as well. I think this is just, again, it's a great actor showcase because Mike Nichols knows how to direct actors. He really has that connection with them and is able to really get very intimate with them, a lot of close-ups, a lot of them monologuing to the camera. And I think they all do a really terrific job with that. I do think that the film toward the end leaves me a little bit cold. I don't really love, I think once Ann-Margret is out of the picture, it loses me a little bit and leaves me again a little chilly, and that's why I don't quite consider this like top tier, like Virginia Woolf level or The Graduate level. But overall, it's a great actor showcase. It's a great early Nicholson. I think that all four performances are terrific, and I think that for them alone, it's a must-see.
Not into the PowerPoint presentation, huh? At the end,
It's
the
just
ball busters on parade, I believe it's called.
I think so.
it's it's a little on the nose for me.
It is very on the nose, but it is dire. It
Yeah,
is. Oh, yeah.
it is bleak. It is a
Yeah.
bleak way to watch somebody spiral out of control. Jay, I believe first time watch.
First watch.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool. Well then, sir, what was your thoughts on Carnal Knowledge?
Yeah, really. I mean, really, really, really liked it. It does have it in some ways. It does kind of feel like he's doing the Virginia Woolf thing again, where it's like I'm making this very provocative, small, condensed, not quite chamber piece like Virginia Woolf is, but certainly a smaller film with there's like 6 speaking parts or something. I mean, it's a really small movie, but I think it not only is a film that feels intense for its time, but I find it like very prescient. The whole time I was thinking like, who's the guy who like teenagers are obsessed with right now? Andrew Tate, that guy. You know that
Oh,
guy?
oh
Yeah.
God.
I
I
was
thought
like,
I didn't think that that's where you were going. I thought you were talking about like some like guy on Twitter that everybody like is thinking about in terms of a heartthrob, not the other way, which is like
no,
Republican
no. I mean, I
propaganda.
was just thinking like most people probably think like the red pill men's rights stuff started like 10 years ago.
Well, like
But
when
then this
Trump
movie
got
is like,
elected.
nah, this has been a thing for like 50 years, guys. This has never not been a thing, really, is what it is. And I think confronting that is a really powerful way to frame the movie. And this is the time when Nichols is still doing very much male centric material with mostly male collaborators. And so to use those collaborators to basically lay out how awful most men are to women and like the gamification of sex and dating, I think is really impressive. And then he kind of shifts over to some more female centric material in the next few years. But I mean, maybe the real coup here is getting Nicholson, who the studio didn't want. He had really only done Easy Rider at this point, I believe. And Nichols said, "This guy is going to be the most important movie star since Brando." It was like he like called his shot. He was like, "This dude is a huge deal, and we need to cast him in this movie." So credit to him for really, really figuring that out. But you spoke about there's obviously this real like nuclear power to the Ann-Margret Nicholson stuff that is just on its face so powerful. But really, to me, Sandy, Art Garfunkel's character, is just like this tragic figure who is obsessed with the bravado of Nicholson. And you can understand that in the like, you just see Jack Nicholson and you are kind of like, this dude's like got it kind of figured out. Like his ideas seem pretty off, but it's sort of like the thing now where if you get this charismatic person with completely poisonous ideas, the well gets poisoned and it just continues downstream. And that's, Nicholson learned it from somebody who learned it from somebody who passed it down for generations, and it perpetuates today. And it is such a, oh, man, I mean, there are so many scenes that just make your skin crawl, make the hair stand up on your arms, just the way that they're treating some of these women. And I I do think Bergen, I mean, for one thing, Bergen at the beginning of the movie, you're just like, this is the perfect woman. I mean, this is like a perfect person. I hope nothing bad ever happens to this person. And then about 35 seconds into the movie, you're like, oh, she's gonna get destroyed. This sucks. And then it's even worse than you can imagine. They make a really interesting decision to sort of hide her away after we flash forward in time, which to me is like a really good way to speak to the mindset of these characters. A nice little metaphor there in the filmmaking. But it's a movie that really leaves a bad taste in your mouth. in exactly the right way. It's so high energy basically all the time without being really loud very often. But it's a very propulsive film that always has this sense of anger bubbling underneath it, and that certainly comes to a head at the end of the film. I was really impressed by this one.
Yeah, this is it's a fascinating movie about toxic masculinity for sure. And just man, from the get-go, just them talking about their conversations are much more different than the conversations they have with obviously Candice Bergen in the first half of the film, and then any other conversations they
Oh, well,
have with
the
anybody
great
else.
dialogue about like, is the real person the performer,
Yeah,
or yeah, I mean, it's really good.
that's great stuff. But
Yeah.
then like especially with Garfunkel and Bergen there at the party where they're like, or when they're talking about it later as they're on their first date or third date, I guess at that point, and they're like, is any of this real? Like, are we real? Are we being real to ourselves? Like, is that like the facade of all this as well too? But just the conversations in the dark, right? Where you clearly these two have Garfunkel and Nicholson. All these guys have is sex on the mind, and they're young too at the time. So you could, if you want to make an excuse for it, even though you clearly don't have to, you can make the excuse of, well, they're just young guys and they've got testosterone and that's all that's on their mind at this point. Because for most people at that age, that's what on their mind. But there is the sense of
They make it competitive.
that's the thing
Yeah.
is they make it a competition. They got a competition in them, and it grows into something completely childish, but completely dangerous as well too. And we see from Art Garfunkel is he's the impressionable one, and Nicholson is the one, slowly turning the knife at every decision and
He's playing
every.
sort of a Jack Nicholson type.
He's yes, he is, but Jonathan is much more, I think, sinister than a lot of even the bad guys that we've seen Nicholson play before, because there is this sense of, well, you can understand why girls would want to go and be with him or would find him charming, but that's all on the surface to this very broken guy who is a child that never grows up. And as the film lays it out, and it becomes more and more his reasons for non-committal, or how he treats Sandy throughout the rest of the film, or how he treats Bobby later in the film too. People are disposable to him, and it's all for the next trick, or it's all for the next hard on, or it's all for the next moment in which he feels as if he has self-satisfaction, to a point where he doesn't even know what self-satisfaction is anymore. He has to manipulate that to a point where it's a written script in a fantasy. And it's such a fascinating, nasty little film, really, from a guy that's, you know, that's, you wouldn't think of it from Mike Nichols, honestly. Like, if people are like,
I mean,
his
he
next
did make
movie,
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
he did, and it's much more in line with that film and the nastiness of that film, but then also the complexities of sex that are talked about in The Graduate as well too. But this is turned up to like 11 in terms of how salacious and how vicious this movie is at times, and unrelenting, and really you can't really root for Sandy too much because of the fact that he's still doing it, but he's doing it his way that's much more tolerable than what we see from Jonathan by the end of the film. So there isn't really, and that's the thing, it goes back to, you don't have to root for every character in every movie. You're just watching human beings and how they interact. And this is just an interesting look into the lives of two guys, but mostly one guy's downfall of what he and what sex can do if to you if you manipulate it in a way that's very off-putting. And yeah, I was watching this go around, and I was just like, damn, like Nicholson, to me, when I was watching this, there was one actor that kind of younger Nicholson was reminding me of, and now in context, he really looked like Leo in this movie. And like
Yes.
that, you would see like Leo playing this smug, slimy bastard. I was giving at times also like a Revolutionary Road kind of Leo, the way that character is living a life of domesticity, even though he clearly wants to be out of this social contract in that movie. And I feel that this is a character that Nicholson's playing where he is sliding through society, trying to find his slimy way into the next, for lack of a better word, into the next fuck. And he doesn't care how he does it. And he doesn't care about the damage that he inflicts to get there. It's a fascinating film.
It's a
So
testament to Nicholson's power as an actor because he takes this individual who's essentially a sociopath, and rather disgusting, but he makes him, very charismatic because Nicholson is just so naturally charismatic and charming. And yeah, he makes this figure completely compelling. And just to go back to Garfunkel, I think I do root for Garfunkel and Sandy at the very beginning because he's sort of a blank slate. He's charmingly awkward as he goes to approach Susan, the Candice Bergen character, as he approaches her, but then just kind of tiptoes to the right and then just looks out the window kind of awkwardly instead, and then goes back to Nicholson and then tries again. And that's very charming. But more and more, he finds himself in this competition with Jonathan, Nicholson's character, as to who can be the more effective womanizer, I suppose. And that's kind of how Sandy leads the rest of his life. He gets bored with Susan, he takes up a new lover, um, and it just becomes this match between Sandy and Jonathan over the years, just trying to outdo one another. But yes, Sandy is kind of a tragic figure because I think if Jonathan wasn't goading him into this and putting pressure on him and manipulating him constantly, he may not have ended up being this person. I think Susan sees in Sandy a real vulnerability and sensitivity and kindness, and that's why she wants to be close to him. But, he's not as exciting and sexy as Jonathan. So, she wants in a perfect world to just be Sandy's friend and maybe Jonathan's lover until she inevitably has to settle for marriage and potentially become a housewife and give up all of her independence.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, like this movie, as I was watching it, I mean, I know that you know Nicholson's films share locations with a lot of other filmmakers, but it felt like like the premise of this, the way it's set up and everything, it was like, okay, what if like a Woody Allen movie turned completely dark quickly? Because in another movie, in another way, this becomes a lighthearted comedy, and it's about these two guys chasing the girl throughout decades and
It
going
is
back
kind
and
of a meet
forth.
cute.
It is kind of like that, and it's sort of a simple setup, but then it turns, like you're saying, Andrew, it's got the dark avenues that these characters have to navigate through. And Susan is such a fascinating character, and Bergen is great. And Jay, you mentioned her being off camera, but we then we get Cindy later in the film, and she is a complete mirror of Susan later on. And it also feels as if like Jonathan has broke Sandy, where he is attracted to almost a similar style of woman that wants to be in a relationship, but is still sexually drawn to this wild card. And meanwhile, he is in this romantic relationship with this woman who is completely fine. It's like there's nothing wrong with the relationship he has with Bobby, but he has to manifest these arguments and these verbal complaints to her over things that are his own doing, and it's just because he doesn't want to commit and he's trying to claw his way out of it. And that's where like he has the big blow up scene, and to your point, Jay, that's where the sort of Virginia Woolf of it all comes to come in for him. But he's just a completely he's not empty as terms of like what we're talking about here with things, but he is an empty character in terms of ideas. He doesn't know what he wants. He's never known what he wants. other than I just want to be with a woman tonight. And when any type of responsibility or any type of relationship, like I don't actually think he really wants Susan. I think he likes the idea of that because then that Sandy doesn't get it. You know what I
The
mean?
only reason that he has sex with all these women is that so that he can hang it over other men's heads.
Well, specifically
I mean,
his
that's what
own
he's doing. He
friend.
wants to win.
You know what I mean? Yeah, oh, for sure. It's again back to it being a competition, but as slowly as we see it's becomes a solo competition. Even from the flashback from college to then, it feels like a solo competition because it feels like he's still trying to pull it out of Sandy, right? When he offers like a wife swap or a couple switch, right?
That's when it starts feeling like, okay, Virginia Woolf 2, here we go. And then
Hmm.
it doesn't last very long. But
No, it doesn't.
he
But
still worms all of his ideas end up worming their way back into Sandy's brain. And they do so in these scenes where we're kind of doing these like intense close-ups on Sandy. And he's like, maybe you're just not supposed to enjoy sex with a woman you love, which is kind of a callback to the very beginning of the film where they're like, would you rather love or be loved?
Mhm.
And this entire idea of love, this abstract idea, how they're trying to literalize it in some way, as a way to like materially turn really what they're doing, I guess, is confusing love and sex at the end of the day. And then as time goes on, they never really grow out of that. And then, by the end of it, Sandy is basically reverting to dating 18-year-old girls like he did when he was in college. And Jonathan is looking back on everything kind of through the eyes of him as a child, adolescent, and then young adult. It is this perpetual state of adolescence that they end up in by the end of the film, which is in and of itself very tragic and very sad and extremely frustrating.
he's also extremely. It looks like by the end he's very wealthy, right? He looks like he's in a good state financially.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them probably are at this point. Like they've made great decisions, but again, Sandy is like you're mentioning, Jay. He's very much. I mean, he's still yes dating young girls, but there is still that sensitivity that you mentioned, Andrew, that is inside of him to potentially have a relationship and have a conversation with someone, as opposed to my buddy is going to show us his sexual conquest on a PowerPoint presentation. Want to go over? Because even still, him inviting a girl
But
over to
he
do that is a
stays
little
there.
weird.
He stays there with her, and he's like, "Okay,
Yeah,
we're gonna get through this,"
yeah,
because he's still like obsessed with this guy.
yeah. It's like the guy from college that you're like that helped you get laid in college, and you keep hanging out with them, and 20 years later, you're like, he's kind of technically my responsibility because nobody else in our friend group wants to spend any time with him whatsoever because they've all grown up, they've got the wife and the kids, and they've grown past this childish behavior. And just the way in which the slideshow ends, and they're just like, okay, you gotta get up. I gotta get out. Like you can go and I'll deal with this. It yeah, the moral consequences that Sandy then kind of hanging out with Jonathan, it becomes like almost out of petty for him at the end,
Yeah. And also, it isn't clear that Jonathan has any other friends. He
No.
seems like an extraordinarily lonely man,
Mm-hmm.
and really leans on Sandy. And, I think that the closer that Jonathan gets to a situation of love, the less interest he has in that situation. Because at first, he and Bobby are just head over heels for each other. They're having nonstop sex in his apartment. I mean, it's just he thinks, this is it. But as soon as she talks about, moving in together, he loses a little interest there. When she quits her job and is just kind of chilling at their place, becomes bored, and then at one point mentions, a lot of women her age will have children. I mean, that's like, woof. Jonathan really is losing interest there. The closer he gets to a normal, functional, loving relationship, the more he is out. So by the end, he's just hanging out with, Rita Moreno as a sex worker because, that's all the satisfaction he seemingly needs.
Yeah. That by the way, that scene. It was what was that movie that came out a couple of years ago with Margaret Qualley and
Oh, the
Christopher Abbott,
I remember which one you're talking about. I can't remember what it's called
where it's
though.
all like in a hotel, right?
I
Mm.
remember which one you're talking about. Yeah.
You guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't know
No,
what the title
It was
is.
a
damn
decent
it.
movie.
It was like a decent like he hires her to be like essentially like,
Well, now I'm gonna look it up.
well, now he's gonna look it up because I don't remember. It was like I don't know, seduction or something like that. I don't remember what the hell it was called. It was like semi
It was
two-handed
called Sanctuary.
sanctuary. That's what it was. Where they
Mm.
like, yeah, where she's he hires her to read off a script and be a dominatrix to her, right? And
Yeah.
essentially the entire time. Um, I was thinking about like how it's always funny. You watch movies like this and how much more interesting they are in terms of sexual dynamics and conversation, and even just having there's a whole movie about that like came out a couple of years ago, and the finale of the 5 minutes here is much more interesting because of the journey that we've gone on with Jonathan throughout this film than like an hour and a half movie that came out from Neon like 3 years ago. um Nicholson's insanely good in this movie. And it
Yes.
and this was, and when was this, Jay? This was like right around
He
like,
was not a proven commodity at this point.
no. So he's like, this is like
He
very
got
early, right?
cast basically off of Easy Rider, and they were like, "You need a bigger person in this movie." And Nichols said, "No, this is the guy."
This would have been right after Five Easy Pieces in terms of release. So he was known, but he wasn't a guarantee at the box office
Yeah.
by any stretch. In a
No,
way, Art Garfunkel was probably the more famous because of his music career.
yeah. Oh, that Art Garfunkel. Well, and he also was good friends with Nichols because, he was one in Catch 22, but then he's
Yeah.
also half responsible for all that damn good music in The Graduate.
Mhm.
Mostly.
Should
I
also
mean,
note that, Candice Bergen and Ann-Margret aren't exactly super A-list at this moment in
no.
time. By this point, Ann-Margret was seen as kind of washed up because after
At the
Bye Bye,
ripe old age of 29,
yeah,
completely washed.
because after Bye Bye Birdie and Cincinnati Kid and oh, she did something else. Can't think. Viva Las Vegas. She
Yeah.
had kind of just a string of flops, and this was seen as a huge comeback for her, even though she's not even 30 years old.
Yeah, which
And
is
then,
insane. I mean, like
yeah,
who does that happen to now? Like what? Like Jennifer Lawrence? Or like
I mean,
where
they do treat her in the movie essentially when they're on their date. They're like, "Oh, you're a cougar. You're like
yeah,
29.
you're like
I
50
love
years
I love an
old. You know
older
what I mean?
woman.
Like, they really
Meanwhile,
no,
she's
they
like the
do.
most gorgeous woman you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
So
yes,
youthful and
yeah.
They did a
vibrant.
really
Yeah.
good like job on the makeup, I guess, of like kind of aging up a 29-year-old. Someone that's like our age or like my age, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like ridiculous,
No, it was in the in the Nichols biography. It was framed as like her agent called Nichols and said, "Look, she's too old to be like the sexy girl anymore." And it's like, "Excuse me? I watched this movie. She is not too old for
No.
that. I will tell you that right
No,
now."
I'll just be
no.
like, Jack, lock it down now. Like, do it. What is wrong with you, man?
Apparently
Uh,
apparently Jack's bungalow in
oh,
after hours of this production was
it was rocking.
a real party.
Yeah.
Put it that
Oh,
way.
oh man. Well,
Nichols did say the one rule as far as partying was concerned is nobody in the cast was allowed to smoke pot
really?
because he wanted it.
He
He
cast
wanted
Art
everybody to be like
Garfunkel?
kind of high strung. Yeah, he was like, I want the tension to always be present. I don't want anybody to chill out.
I don't buy any of that shit. I bet Art Garfunkel smoked
Well,
some.
Nicholson, he alleged that he had smoked every day for 15 years,
Yeah.
and then he
So,
stopped for this movie.
oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't see.
Well, I do think everybody looks kind of like perpetually anxious in this movie, which I think is very
They look on
intentional.
edge. They look like they need a cigarette. You
Yeah.
know, like they need a smoke break. Maybe if they had a smoke break, maybe they wouldn't be so on the edge sexually throughout this entire film. But I think that that's kind of like the point. Is like, man, they've just these guys are just like that's all they can think about and all they can focus on. It is just it's so annoying to be around.
But it's been like hard coded in their brains.
Yeah, it's like sex, 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 sex
Early
the whole
age.
time, and
Yeah.
you're just like, Jesus Christ! Like, this is all they talk about. Like, we will see it throughout the whole film, and you could feel maybe it's repetitious, but it's like, no, it's just like you're saying, Jay. It's how they're wired, and it's wild. Because I mean, there's people still to
Or
this
maybe
day
not
that are
even how they're
wired this
wired,
way.
but how they're conditioned. I mean, I guess that's probably the
How did they, like the interesting thing? I mean, so they're roommates in college, right?
Mm.
So like, I guess that they get, they're two young men, and maybe they were just assigned the dorm together. Probably weren't like childhood best friends or anything like that. It just seems like this is their way to connect through.
Sandy got real unlucky.
Man, the
He is
admissions council.
he's so impressionable. Like early on when he's talking to Susan, and he's like, "Well, you know what? I feel like we're all playing a character." And she says, "I think I disagree with you." And he's just like, "Oh yeah, yeah,
I disagree with myself."
Yeah. Or when Nicholson's like, "I didn't think her rack was big enough, man," and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. You're probably."
But her
right.
legs,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Her legs, I wouldn't kick her out of bed. And then he repeats it. Like, I wouldn't
Yeah,
kick
that
her out of
becomes
bed.
his
You know,
big
like,
one of his big lines.
yeah, like where he just like keeps repeating things, and and that's the lingering effect that it has. But then it's also too like Sandy, the way in which like he's trying to condition, he's just trying to be Jonathan, where he's like, but by this date I should be able to kiss you twice, and by this date I should be able to feel up your breasts.
You let me kiss you last week, so
Yeah,
why don't you let me kiss you twice this week?
Felt very like
transitive property.
It's very like Colin Farrell in Banshees of Inisherin. Well, you liked me last week, so therefore I could fill you up then. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird like math that he's doing to put together.
Each week is a level up, correct?
Yeah, but it's being fed through the machine of Jonathan and the locker room as they're walking to class and everything. Like, why haven't you been with her this week, or why haven't you filled up her? I would have done it by now. And then it's just like it feels like the biggest egg on, and then like Jonathan's just like, I've fine, fuck it, I've had enough. Like he gave him enough passes, enough weeks, enough time, and just like at the party to like make his move and everything. But clearly he knew the whole time he was going to do this. And then like, I think the most like disturbing scene of the film, weirdly for me, is him jumping into the pool with excitement. And it's like, do you not understand what you just did, you son of a bitch? Like you're so happy.
Again,
but yet
he won.
The layers though of the lie, and to keep it there is kind of also insane too. And it's supposed to be a moment of joy for this character, but it's just like, no, this is like the sickest thing you could be at this moment. It's a celebration of almost evil, well, probably evil intentions. And
then of course at the end in the slideshow he does include Susan,
and they don't really kind of mention it, but like they clearly show like
no, well, he tries to skip over it because
he tries to
supposed to see
but he definitely wanted Sandy to see that.
Yeah. But it's like but again Sandy has been literally making excuses for this guy for years, and he finally shows him that after all this, and yet he's still walking out with him and he's still talking to him. He's just, again, it's like you're trapped, just
in a lot of ways that's his
guy.
Mentor. And he still holds a lot of the ideas
mentor
that
friend
he put in his brain. Yeah.
I just picture these two at their college orientation, and Jonathan is just looking to prey upon the most awkward, jittery, quiet man in the room, and that is Sandy. And that's where it all begins. Because this whole film is just Jonathan preying upon people. He preys upon Susan. He preys upon Bobby. He can't help himself.
Listen,
he
Bobby's
goes after the vulnerable.
Bobby's the most relatable character in this movie. I would love to just stay at home, not have to work, and be in bed all day. Like that sounds like a dream.
I don't know. She seems kind of miserable. I got to be honest, especially when she tries to kill herself. But
yeah, well, that's because of Jonathan. But I'm just saying, like in terms of her life before all that, like seems like a pretty good life. Like I don't know. Like if I could just stay home and watch movies all day, I would. In bed? Are you kidding me? I don't have to work. But also, Jonathan told her to do that. That's the other thing. She's in this miserable position because he said it was a good idea and she trusted him. She believed in him. And then he flips on her. Total not everybody is Sandy where they can put up with it and be able to just put on a smiling face and move on. Like it takes a real emotional toll on her. And this is someone as you watch, and that's why I think Ann-Margret's incredible in this movie. Because it's
Agreed.
like this woman is just like, I want to just be loved,
Mhm.
and you're telling me all I have to do is be at home, but you're not encouraging me to do anything. Now you're just getting on me for shit that's not even that important. And then there's almost like this it's almost like this Reynolds Woodcockness to him in this movie where he just like gets bored of her. And the
Mhm.
tennis scene is a perfect example of like she's just there and doesn't exist to anyone in that whole room.
Well,
So
even worse than that, he's going out of his way to piss her off.
yeah, and then he gives her up to his best
Oh,
friend.
you're terrible.
You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, you can go be with her. I'm gonna try to be with your girl now. And then what's so funny is like Cindy, who's wild in this movie too, is like, if you didn't have to come up with some sort of cock and bull story to try to be with me. If you want to just be with me and have a laugh, let's do it.
Call me
But we,
later.
but call me later. But also, if he touches your girl, it's done. So she has a limit to all this as well too. And then he becomes disinterested because he's not in control. When the women finally take control, he doesn't want to be anywhere near it at all whatsoever. And he's scared of it in a lot of ways too.
Yeah. Cindy sucks. She calls Bobby a tub of lard.
Oh
So
man, that was just like, damn, that's
Yeah, that was bizarre. I
she
was
didn't
like,
do anything to you.
is there another character that we haven't met yet?
Yeah, I was like,
You're talking about Ann-Margret?
you're talking about Ann-Margret who looks great in this movie. Like, what are you talking about? She doesn't look any dissimilar than you. Like this is so mean. But then again, it's just like Cindy chose her true colors as well too.
They wanted Jane Fonda for Bobby. She
Ooh,
turned it down.
mm.
I don't know if Jane would have been able to. I don't. There's some not. No.
I think that there's a certain fragility to Ann-Margret as Bobby that I don't think Jane Fonda would have had. I think Jane is too commanding and strong and confident.
She would have
Um,
never been able to do this. I don't think.
yeah,
I don't think she would have. I don't know.
I
I mean,
can't
and she was
picture.
doing. She would have had to turn down Clute in order to do this too.
Yeah, she did
There's.
Clute
Yeah.
instead.
There's no way. And that's a movie just lives and dies off of this magnificent performance from Jane. So it's like, no, thank you. But it would have been interesting to see her. It just would have been interesting to see her and Jack go back and forth together. But I think,
It would have been more of a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf kind of energy
yeah,
to like
because
gladiators.
yeah, but also like Bobby doesn't go big. She closes in on
Right, I know.
herself.
I think
You
that's
know what
a
I mean?
great part of her performance. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's why. But for Jane, it feels like Jane would not stand by just allowing Bobby to become a punching bag of
Yeah,
insults
yeah,
in this movie.
exactly,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
And
It would have
that's
been a
what
George and Martha dynamic.
exactly. And the changes would have had to been made.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I mean, she's great in this. Garfunkel, like you mentioned it, Andrew, he's so good in this. This is like the fucked up version of Challengers, in a way, like
I was thinking
this
that.
of this, like, as well, because like you know, you know, our Garfunkel is essentially the Mike Feist. Like you could
Yeah.
just cast him in this. You could just have Zendaya as Candice Bergen and Josh O'Connor plays the Nicholson character. It kind of would work, honestly. It feels like a movie Luca would make, too. But yeah, no, this is it's a good movie, right, guys?
Yeah.
Jay, anything else?
I think it's a really good movie. I mean, I think we should probably talk a little bit about the reception of the movie.
Yeah,
There was
this
a
is
theater manager who literally got arrested for obscenity for showing the movie. It was just like there were kind of two sides of it, and then a middle as well. But the two extreme sides were this is hollow provocation, which a lot of the critics kind of threw at it. And then the other side is this is a dangerous work that is going to reshape society and destroy the minds of men. And then there was this middle ground that was kind of like, it's like a commentary on that stuff. It's not really about that. It reminds me kind of the Joker reception.
Oh, like the Todd Phillips movie?
Yeah, yeah. Except the thing about that movie is it has no message really. And everybody was like, this is there. People are going to get killed. And then you watch the movie and because of this thing, like that. This is
I'm telling you, that was the whole thing when I went to the theater and saw Joker. They like wanded me and like when you go to like a basketball stadium.
No, it was insane.
It was like they had cops outside every theater in town. I'm like, this is what we're using public resources for a movie that's not even that good. Like, what are we doing here?
Not even that good or provocative. Like
but I understand the sort of mentality that people brought up, because obviously there was the tragedy, for the Dark Knight Rises that in Colorado that had happened. And I think people were nervous about that because it is a rated R version. And then you had the Venice receptions for that as well too. So, but yeah, that's the good old media. Then we'll just ratchet up a controversy for no damn reason.
But it did have this long tail where it was, the Wonder Years. What's the Archie Bunker show? What's that one called?
All in the Family?
Yeah, it was discussed on that show. Oh, yeah. It was all over the night talk shows and.
The title alone, that's just like, I told my wife we were going to watch this. She goes, "Oh, that's about sex." I'm like, you don't know the half of it.
It's a really good title.
It's to get people
really
in the
evocative
seats. Absolutely. Yeah. Andrew, you could speak to this as well, but it's like watching the movie, knowing all that information. What are they talking about? Like most of this is just dialogue. Right. And like,
also the first time the C word was ever said in a major motion picture.
Can't?
Yes.
Can't. Okay. Okay. Well, everybody's got a different.
There was a perception at the time that this was basically hardcore pornography.
That's crazy. Because there's nothing really bad in this.
No, well, it is the same way that Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? That was like so shocking. And then you watch it now and it's like, this is like PG-13.
Yeah.
What are you guys talking about?
I think the word of mouth was that you basically saw Jack Nicholson and Ann-Margret have sex on screen was essentially what was like the chatter.
Like non-simulated.
In the dark. You know what I mean? Like you can't see anything.
The closest thing to that is when they pan over and it's immediately afterwards and she's like on her side and they're talking. I guess that's the most salacious.
I guess there's that, or like when he's talking to Garfunkel and he's in the shower and the fog is there, and you don't see Nicholson's junk, but like there are foreign movies at the time that are being sent over to America that's far worse than this.
At one point he does pull an Oppenheimer and sit naked with his legs crossed.
He does, but you don't see like it's not a Willem Dafoe situation. They got to tuck that thing back in there. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing happening there. Like even the whole scene at the end with Rita Moreno, which it's just like, I totally forgot she was in this. And so when this happened, I was just like, oh my God, I forgot that Rita Moreno is doing this at the end of the film. But you don't see anything other than his face. And
there are plenty of lines in this movie that you wouldn't say in good company. Like,
Well, yes, I understand that, but that's what an R rating's for. Like, it's not, this isn't like,
it's not.
This isn't worth going to the Supreme Court for.
Nymphomaniac.
You know what I mean? Like this was like a giant deal. They went to court and didn't they go to the Georgia Supreme Court? Like
I assume they did for that.
Yeah, like the
arrest.
Yeah, like they found all this stuff where they were like talking about it as a matter of free speech and a matter of like art, and like that they re-released it later. Like this was the tagline that they used was the Supreme Court has ruled that carnal knowledge is not obscene. So see it now. And this was in 70, like this was like in just a couple of years later. That's insane. because
Nichols'
like
movies were in so
he was always in trouble.
controversial. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like what a
Yeah.
bad boy. You know what I mean?
Virginia Woolf, this, Silkwood, all like litigated movies.
Which is why it's so funny because like for an era in which like guys could get away, directors could get away with fucking anything on screen. Like literally anything on screen. He's the one that one is under a microscope, but then he also is not the one like making movies during that era that's throughout the whole decade that is as morally fascinating as a movie like this. You know what I mean?
So he had to make his most provocative film of all afterwards, Day of the Dolphin.
What if the dolphin killed the president of the United States so that censorship was,
when Andrew was
decades.
talking earlier about Nichols, I think I can find merit in everything. I was like, we should have brought him on for a Day of the Dolphin.
We should have done a Day of the Dolphin.
If that's the case. Yeah. Andrew, tell me what merit Day of the Dolphin has.
I mean, it has George C. Scott just in a scenery chewing lead performance, so it's worthwhile for that.
He's chewing like that dolphin is the president of the United States and bullets flying everywhere. God, they really should remake that movie, Day of the Dolphin.
No, they shouldn't.
Great-
They'll
great
make it like
tagline.
Cocaine Bear and it'll be terrible.
No, it'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be like one of those sci-fi production, right?
Right.
Watch it.
Well, no,
watch
it's like
watch like
Cocaine
Bong
Bear. The
Joon
problem
Ho
with-
take it on. That would be pretty wild, right?
The movies like Cocaine Bear and The Meg and all that stuff, they're too winky, self-knowing that it becomes incredibly annoying and grating.
Yeah, it feels like a Doug Liman joint.
There is a middle ground because Day of the Dolphin treats it like it's the Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah. It's played straight.
Yeah. But
Oh man, now I kind of want that. Like, can you imagine like Edward Berger's The Day of the Dolphin? You know what I mean? Because he seems like right, like the kind of guy that would do it. Oh my god, the vocal Bergerman score would be so good. It would be a complete rip off of Jaws, and everybody would love it, including the Academy. Oh my god, Andrew, where are you at with Conclave?
I liked it, but didn't love it, honestly.
Okay. Jay, you're on a middle ground like I am, right?
I'm kind of just like I found the ending absolutely baffling. I will admit,
Like silly,
same.
like it's super silly sauce. Like
it is a honestly a pretty junky movie.
Yeah.
that is so. Berger makes a good looking, like elegant movie, but it is in this case in service of like true airport novel junk.
I finished the book before seeing the film at Telluride. And when I read the book and I read the ending, and it's even more like literal and blunt in this because it's an airport novel. That's what it is. And I was like talking to Sophia Simnello and past guest Christina Yearling Barrow about this. I was like, they've got to explain this or at least talk about this a little bit more, because in the book it's just like, this is what I am, end of book, literally next page, done, that's it. And I'm like, you gotta have a little bit more. The movie just refused to do any of that either, and
It
it's
doesn't
just,
grapple with it whatsoever.
no, and that's a very big thing to grapple with. And even in the book they're like, well, this is a secret we're gonna have to hold until our days, and because like when the Pope dies, they're going to do an autopsy and da 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 da. And
But then there are times where you're just hooting and hollering at some of the performances.
yeah, because it's also super silly and stupid. But like that's why he would be great for Day of the Dolphin. That's what I'm trying to say. Like Day of the Dolphin, who would replace George C. Scott? Who would be that?
Oh my
that.
God, the dolphin trainer.
I mean, I know
Probably
that like
probably The Rock.
probably The Rock.
Yeah,
I mean,
probably.
it's probably The Rock.
Would Edward Berger work with The Rock?
I don't know. Maybe after the Safdies, which one is he? Benny is doing.
He's
his?
with Benny. Yeah.
Maybe Benny will.
Josh has got
salvage
the
him.
Josh has got
the Timmy
pink-
movie.
I'm nervous about that thing.
I'm not. Josh Safdie's so good.
Are you putting all your eggs in the Josh Safdie basket and just leaving Benny dry?
I'm thinking Josh is the true visionary.
He's the Joel
of the duo. Exactly. Yeah.
and
That's where my mind
and
is.
Benny's the Ethan. I don't know. Well, Benny did work with what's his face on. God, I can't even remember
The
that damn
Curse.
The Curse. Yeah,
Yeah.
Nathan Fielder. That's who it is. Thank
Hmm.
you, Brain, for helping me out.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm putting all my chips on Josh.
I watched Drive Away
I
Dolls
like Benny as
recently,
an actor.
and that movie
You watch Drive Away Dolls? Yeah, not good.
that movie sucked.
I liked it.
Did you like it?
I
I
did.
thought it was
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
leaning not awesome.
It was like it reminded me of like Intolerable Cruelty
Oh,
and
wow.
No,
Lady Killers.
when you look at that movie and then you look at Tragedy of Macbeth, it's like, oh, I
Oh,
understand who's responsible for what,
See,
and
I
probably
loved
why they're better when they work together. Yeah,
I loved Margaret Qualley's performance in that, and I know it's
she's good.
very
No,
she's
poorly
so
she
good.
written.
she's just good in everything. Like
She is.
Yeah.
I hated Kinds of Kindness, but I walked out of that movie being like, God, if we just had Jesse Plemons and Margaret Qualley in every movie, I think I'd be okay. Like I think we'll be
Mm,
fine. And then I watched The Substance, and then I know everybody loves Demi Moore, but I think Qualley's the best thing about The Substance. I think she's really good in
yeah,
that
I
She's
just
movie.
great in it.
rewatched it a couple nights ago, and I think I agree.
It's a good movie. Jay, you like that movie, right?
Really liked it.
I
Yeah.
was shocked you did because I could have swore you would have hated that ending.
Oh, the ending. I mean, the ending rules. What are you talking about? Just going
Well,
like
I don't know.
completely over the top.
I don't know.
Like
Sometimes when
you want to talk about on the nose.
I
I
was
mean,
gonna say you don't like on the nose
when it
messages,
is
so that's why.
there's like a tipping point where it's like annoying, 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 annoying. Paul Verhoeven spectacular. Like that's the metric. Um,
I could have yeah. You know what? I was watching. I was like, I don't know if he's gonna vibe with it because it could be too much over the top. But then it's also like there's a commitment to the bit that she
oh,
does
that
throughout that
movie
entire
is
movie. So
so
it's
aggressively on the nose the entire time, and also just so abrasive
yeah.
with like Dennis Quaid chewing shrimp and stuff.
Mm.
Where it's relentless, and then it
That's the
takes
best sound
everything up a
work of the
notch
year.
at the end of the movie.
That's the best
It's
sound work of the year
I loved
for
it.
sure. Yeah. Speaking of abrasive, Carnal Knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, anything else you guys want to mention about the movie real quick?
I really like the phone call scene between Susan and Sandy. I think
Ooh,
that's definitely Candice Bergen's best scene in it, where she kind of bids. Actually, it's between Susan and Jonathan, not
yeah,
Susan and Sandy,
but it's
where she
about Sandy.
basically, yeah, where she basically like cuts Jonathan off and says, she's
Mhm.
happy to be friends. And it's a really great phone call scene. And, there's been so many like memorable phone call scenes that have happened in film history. Like, I mean, like Barbara Streisand in The Way We Were, or Louise Reiner, who basically won an Oscar for a single phone call scene in The Great Ziegfeld. And I think that this is almost on that level. I think Candice Bergen does a really terrific job in that. And I wish she was in more of the film. I know that it may not make sense for her to appear in more of the film after that, but I just think she's so sensational, and I think she was hurt come awards time because Ann-Margret's in the latter half of the film, and when you leave this movie, she's so fresh on your mind. I think that Candice Bergen ultimately got kind of overshadowed.
Yeah,
And what I mean, the Oscar scene would be the big fight, right? I guess if there is
Yeah.
one in particular that really sticks with you from a like a traditional, whoa, what a work of intense acting. That's kind of it.
yeah. But I also think too the scene that follows where it feels so intrusive of Jonathan while they're in the apartment and their life is going on. You can feel as if they've settled in Sandy and Susan to be in a relationship, to be what would assume as husband and wife or just be together like partners. Him just sitting there in the corner trying to process this whole thing, being completely flexed out, and how it is weirdly almost the same face that he gets at the end of the film when he is with Rita Moreno, but it's different. Um, it's the same face, but it's the different results, and the way that there's a duality there in terms of how sad he is, but then he's turned sadness into what turns him on at the end. almost as punishment, but it's punishment for pleasure. And you're not ever once feeling sorry for him, but it's also just extremely sad to watch. And Nicholson, it's all in his eyes and the way just the stillness of his face and his mouth. Like there's this
I mean,
like
he does
weird,
just look like the devil. He
just
does.
he does, but it's I don't know. It's I don't think he's devilish. I just think it's there's more to it than that, Jay. You know what I mean?
I just mean inherently. I'm just saying
Oh,
one of
and
his
yeah,
traits
Jack always looks like the
like
devil.
Satan,
Yeah, he's got that. He's got the Satan, or he almost
and
a little rat
win you
too.
over.
You know?
Yeah, in that way. Question: Who among the members of the book club, who is the best actress?
Oh shit! I
So
somehow knew
just
you were going to
for
bring this
those
up on
for
a
those who
Candice
don't,
Bergen
I mean,
episode.
I'm a big book club head. Uh, I'm a member of the club, and so for those unfamiliar, or as a reminder, you got Diane Keaton, Jane Fonda, Candice Bergen, Mary Steenburgen. Who you going with out of that crop?
I
Well,
vote
Andrew,
Diane Keaton,
wow, yeah.
personally. I love, I mean, they're all terrific. Jane Fonda's brilliant, and Candice Bergen's wonderful, and Mary Steenburgen's fabulous too. But Diane Keaton is one of my all-time favorites. I mean, I grew up watching all the Woody Allen movies, and I think she's awesome in all of those. But I also think she's terrific in more dramatic stuff. I think Shoot the Moon, which is an early '80s film she did that isn't really discuss now. I think that's one of the decade's very best performances. And then, Red, Something's Gotta Give. I mean, it's just a stacked filmography. So I'd go Diane.
Probably the right answer, but
Diane's great. I'm going Jane.
see, my heart wants to say Mary.
Mary's great
Oh,
though too. Oh, I love them all. I mean, Candace is great too. I mean,
When I think about the
you know,
performances they've given, like the first one I think of is her and Melvin and Howard. For some reason, I'm just like that is a luminous performance to me.
oh, of all
Uh,
of them, like if I think of all of them,
for some reason, that's where my mind
if I
immediately
thought of
goes.
all of them, the first one I think of is Diane as Annie Hall.
I
That's the
mean,
first one I thought of.
totally valid. It's totally that
She's
is a
incredible.
far more famous performance than Mary Steenburgen in Melvin and
Melvin
Howard.
and Howard. No, I mean like, or I also think of Candice Bergen as Murphy Brown.
yeah.
I watched that show a lot when I was a kid, and she's wonderful on that show. But there's just something about Jane's run in the 70s and the 80s, but then also her later career, what she's been doing over the last 15, 20 years, doing guest spots, but then she'll do a movie every now and then that's either fun or like when she's in a couple
No,
of
she's in the book club zone.
yeah. Well, but like in
80
the
for
last couple of
Brady.
years, she when she did Youth and shows that there's still potential for like a great performance left in her, or even though the show is not good at all, anytime she was on like the newsroom, and she'd
Yeah.
come in there and spit that Sorkin dialogue out for like a couple episodes. You're like, oh, Jane Fonda, if you gave her something right now, could win an Oscar. And I
Yeah.
think out of all of them, there's still that Jane still got the juice left in her, and Grace and Frankie is also another point of that where she's working with Lily Tomlin and it's not in that zone. She doesn't have to be in that zone, but if she wanted to, she could be. I think Diane's perfectly in that zone now, and
I
I
think
think
Diane is the best and Mary is my favorite. That's what I think I'm settling on.
I love Mary. She's just wonderful. And also she's married to Ted Danson and they're the cutest couple in the world. And
Mhm.
she's big into her music now. You know what I mean? She's um they're all great. Like yeah.
I will say Candice Bergen was in my best supporting actress top 5 for Let Them All Talk a few years
Oh,
back.
she was
Oh my
my winner.
She was his
Really?
winner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's just something like incredible about like her just shoving or shaking off wanting to hang out with Meryl in that movie.
Mhm.
It's like nobody could do that and get away with it. It felt like, and
I forgot Mary
so,
Steenburgen wrote that Jesse Buckley song.
yeah, for Wild Rose.
I forgot about that.
It's so
Yeah.
good. It's so
It is
good.
great. It's great.
Buckley's she did like a performance at the BAFTA of it, and it was really good too. Like, yeah, should have been nominated for an Oscar. That's what it should have been. Yeah, eat your heart out, Diane Warren.
But just a reminder, the best performance in book club is Andy Garcia.
True, and Andy Garcia rules. Like
he does.
I love Andy Garcia. Why did Andy Garcia become like the biggest thing on the planet? Like it felt like after Godfather 3, they didn't know what to do with them, right?
Yeah,
because they were kind of like implying, or Coppola was implying in that movie, well, he's the Godfather, he's the next Pacino, like do something with him, and he never did anything.
I mean, did he ever have like a here's your shot at being a movie star movie?
I think City Hall was teed up for that, and that was a huge flop.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, then he does something like When a Man Loves a Woman, but then Meg Ryan gets all the attention for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like somewhere out there, Andy Garcia's got a part waiting for him to just.
I can see it.
For everybody to celebrate. It's because now he's a character actor, a veteran actor. They're rough. Somebody save Andy from himself.
Yeah.
I love Andy. I love Andy Garcia. He's so good in the Ocean's movies. He's incredible in those movies. I watch those movies all the time, and I'm like, man, if I can give him some Andy Garcia, that would be great. But that's a great
the president
question.
in Geostorm. I take it back.
All right. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about Carnal Knowledge, or you guys think we're good?
Any more book club?
More book club? Okay. I wish Jack could have made a book club movie. I think he would have had a ball on one of those things.
I miss Jack, man.
We're not going to talk about. Well, no. This is the only time we're going to talk about Jack extensively in the series, right?
Because we're not doing
The Fortune.
We're not doing Fortune.
Yeah, we're not doing Heartburn.
Wolf.
We're not doing Wolf.
Yeah, we're not doing Wolf. I forgot about that.
We're not doing Wolf. All right. Well,
love
Jay,
him.
He's
the greatest movie star of all time, in my opinion.
Maybe one point later.
Take.
Maybe one point later this year, we'll talk about Jack again. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
One day. Maybe.
One day we'll talk about it.
You gotta do the James L. Brooks series.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Jay, that would be
a good one.
That'd be your series, wouldn't it, buddy?
That would be. Love me some Brooksy.
I know you do.
Love that Spanglish.
What is it? How do you know?
Yeah. How do you know? No question mark.
Yeah. Jay.
A movie I kind of mildly defend.
What? Who do you?
How do you know? Like the softest of defenses.
Do you give that movie a big wet kiss like Paul Rudd and Jack Nicholson do in every scene?
That movie costs like $110 million.
It's crazy when you really think about it. That movie is like 4 people in mostly rooms. It's stupid.
I mean, I think probably 40% of that was Jack Nicholson's salary, but
probably so. Jay.
Yes.
Before we get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to test your award season knowledge based on the film we just reviewed, Carnal Knowledge, in a segment we called It's an Honor to Get Nominated. Now, Andrew, I know that you're a big awards person, but Jay is not. So please refrain while we, from giving Jay the answers here. But we will talk about that here in a second and more. Jay, was Carnal Knowledge nominated for any Academy Awards?
All right, so I am of 2 minds about this movie.
Well, I would like you to just be one mind. That would be great.
Academy Awards. 1, too provocative, too hot for the Academy to touch. And then the other side of the coin is such a cultural moment that it got a lot of attention at the Oscars. I'm also going to use a context clue to, I believe, knock out one Oscar up front. When Andrew said Ann-Margret got the attention that perhaps Candice Bergen might have gotten more of. So I'm going to say Ann-Margret was nominated for Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah, good for you for listening.
Thank you.
Jay.
Thank you.
That is correct.
All right.
That's not Andrew's fault. That's just you being attentive to these things.
Yes, I'm a great listener. Yeah, I'm famous for
and guess what? And guess what?
Jay things that Ryan says all the time. But
no, that is true. And guess what?
Yes,
that's it.
Oh, that's the only one.
That's the only one.
Not even a screenplay.
You would have thought.
No.
This actually feels so much like a screenplay nomination.
Very much so.
Ann-Margret was nominated, and she won the Globe.
Mm,
She won the Globe.
got that
She
globe.
Garfunkel was nominated at the Globes, and Jack was nominated at the
Oh,
Globes.
look at Garfunkel.
Yeah,
Get it, man.
good for her.
Nominated
This
in
is
supporting,
in
should be
supporting,
noted.
which is bullshit because he's like a borderline. Well, I guess you could say he's
He's the lead
supporting.
of the first act.
Pretty
for
much.
sure.
Yeah,
He's in
yeah.
a lot of this damn movie. It's the second act where it really becomes Jack's show, and everything. But yeah, Jack was not nominated at this time. This was the year 19 1972 Oscars for the year of 71. Jay, we've talked about this year. This is the year of The French Connection
Ah,
and William Friedkin, a guy of the 70s who had a big run in the 70s as well. Good old Bill Friedkin here.
Gene Hackman.
Gene
Almost in The
Hackman.
Graduate.
Jane won for Clute, and Cloris Leachman won and Ben Johnson won for the last picture show.
Yeah.
This lineup was The French Connection, Clockwork Orange, Fiddler on the Roof, The Last Picture Show, and Nicholas and Alexandra.
Nicholas and Alexandra. That one hasn't had much staying power.
I have seen Nicholas and Alexandra. I was lucky enough, speaking, Andrew, of Kevin Jacobson, I was lucky enough to come on the episode for 1971 to talk about Jane Fonda's performance for Clute.
Excellent.
And Nicholas and Alexandra is a movie that I watched, and it fucking sucks. It was I had to talk about.
Gonna cross that one off my to watch list.
I had to watch 5 movies, Jay, and 3 of them were not a chore. One of them was a mild chore, and the other one was Nicholas and Alexandra. So I had to watch that. I had to watch Mary Queen of Scots, Vanessa Redgrave, which is better than the Margot Robbie Saoirse Ronan one, but not saying much in my opinion.
No, it's boring.
Sunday Bloody Sunday, which is a good movie, but Glenda Jackson's a supporting actress and not a lead, because it's, in my opinion, that is a movie where Peter Finch is the most shown actor in that movie. It felt like she's still great. And then, of course, Jane for Clute, who's phenomenal, and Julie Christie for McCabe and Miss Miller.
Oh, I mean, come on.
Which is one of my favorite films of all time. So, I don't know. What would you guys do? Would you guys nominate this movie, Carnal Knowledge, in any other category? Andrew?
Definitely Best Actor for Jack. He's fantastic.
Who would you kick out?
Oh, I don't think Walter Matthau needs to be in there for Koch.
For Koch.
Oh, a real kick from Nichols.
Yeah.
After their bumpy relationship.
Oh, man.
Get him out of there.
I'd kick out even George C. Scott for The Hospital.
Oh, another kick from Nichols.
Yeah, he's
from the future.
I like George C. Scott there, but
I think he's good. I just think Jack's working on a level here. I mean, I know he's about to go on this run where he's going to get nominated for fucking everything and win a bunch of stuff, but this is such thorny work from him usually this is the case early in their careers when they are making these things before they get to build their cachet. They're picking these out of the box projects and stuff. And
I would nominate Candice Bergen, supporting actress. She's heartbreaking.
I'm not sure I would go all the way cinematography, but where there's that one shot where Jonathan and Bobby are on their first date, and I don't know if like they're spinning, like they're literally spinning, or what they're doing with the camera, but it is like such a disorienting, incredible shot. So
I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Cinematography was won by Fiddler on the Roof. And the other nominees were French Connection, Last Picture Show, Nicholas and Alexandra in the summer of 72.
Yeah, Nicholas and Alexandra was one of those. I think they just kind of wined and dined voters, and
it was really one of those.
In return.
It was really one of those last cases. Like we have an epic on our hand. We can nominate it, and I'm like, you didn't fucking have to. Like you just you didn't have to do this. It's so. I mean. For history context, like it's a really fascinating era of history.
Yeah.
but it's so fucking boring. God, that movie is
Bad Downs and Broomsticks getting an Oscar.
for visual effects.
Oh,
It won.
that's a great movie.
Let's go.
You a big Bed Down Broomsticks guy? Jay?
No,
Yeah,
it's
I
okay.
love Angela.
Oh, she's great. It's a good year for movies.
Mrs. Potts.
Yeah, yes, she's Mrs. Potts. She's not like Broadway legend.
I mean, tell me I'm wrong. Is she or is she not Mrs. Potts?
Well, what would she be known for? Her Broadway wins, Murder, She Wrote, or Mrs. Potts?
I think her cameo in Mary Poppins Returns.
The balloon lady.
Oh, the
Yes.
balloon. I think she'd
The
be
one
known.
that was very clearly supposed to be Julie Andrews.
And they were like, Julie's like, no, I don't want to be in this.
Honestly, good for her
Julie.
for being like, I don't want to overshadow
Emily Blunt.
Yeah, good
Which,
for her.
honestly, Emily Blunt, pretty good.
She was pretty good. That movie kind of stinks, but
It's all over the place. I mean, it's essentially what a lot of Lego sequels are, which is a remake of the original. But I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda is no Dick Van Dyke. There's just something like, I know Dick Van Dyke gets a lot of shit for that accent, but there's also,
I mean, it's also directed by Public Enemy #1,
Rob Marshall.
Robbie Marshall.
Is that your guy that you just hate the most, Rob Marshall?
No, I mean, surely there's someone I hate more than him because I still
I'm
like
sure,
Chicago.
I'm sure like Taika is worse for you,
Ooh.
or
I like some of Taika's movies though.
yeah, you do.
Yeah,
You
I like
don't ever sound like it.
Hunt for the Wilder People.
Oh, okay. Did you like What We Do in the Shadows?
Yeah, What We Do in the Shadows is good.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I don't think Rob Marshall's made a decent film beyond Chicago, personally.
I haven't seen Memoirs of a Geisha in a while. Is that
Pirates
good?
of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides is one of
Is
the
that
worst
rough?
movies I've seen in a theater.
Andrew, is that a rough movie?
Memoirs is not great.
It hasn't
No.
aged well? Okay. I don't know.
And there's some good performances, but
I saw it really young, and I have yet to. It's one of those like you don't want to see it again because like, you got to see an adult movie, at the time. You know what I mean?
yeah, he's all wrong for that material.
Nine is a just
Disaster.
a mess. It's like parts of it you're like, wow, I can see what you're going for, and I like it. And then there are other parts where you're like, please never have the greatest actor of all time sing ever again. Like Daniel Day-Lewis as a singer is bad.
No.
We found the thing he can't do.
Yeah, he can't sing. But what else did he do? Well, he did Scuttlebutt, which is your favorite thing, Jay.
Just that deserved capital punishment. I'm not a fan of capital punishment, but if anything deserves it, Scuttlebutt.
Who are you more mad at for that? Are you mad at Rob Marshall, Lin-Manuel Miranda, or Awkwafina, or is it
I
just
guess
like
really
they're all
the
in
answer
jail?
is probably Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah.
If we're being real. I mean,
Lin gets off scot-free.
Awkwafina put in a bad position. Can't blame her.
No. So, well, he also worked with. Rob Marshall.
Lin-Manuel.
I'm doing it. Here we go.
Kid rap that can go south real quick.
Well, Rob Marshall. The reason why he got Chicago was one. He had a lot of those TV musicals that just hit. They were huge hits. He had the Victor Victoria on television, Mrs. Santa Claus, which was the Angela Lansbury film. He had the Cinderella with Brandy and Whitney Houston.
I remember that one.
He had the Annie one in with Kathy Bates and Audra McDonald and Victor Garber on ABC. So he had a big.
Sure.
He built up enough cachet to get Chicago, and he hit that out of the park. But then it's Memoirs of a Geisha, 9, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which is one of the worst movies
Absolutely
I've ever
terrible.
seen in theaters, period. Andrew Carden's favorite movie of all time, though. Into the Woods, which
That's the
from
one
what
where they go into the woods.
correct, and they say it 100
got
times.
it.
I don't think Into the Woods is terrible, but I also am not beholden to the source material, which I know a lot of people that love that Sondheim musical say it's fucking terrible. But as a movie, I thought I was entertained. Mary Poppins.
I think it's pretty terrible.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. And I don't hate Mary Poppins Returns. I actually liked it, but also I am completely nostalgic for the first one. It's one of my favorite movies of all time too. So I get that. and then Little Mermaid, which is a fucking awful movie, and I don't want to hear anything about it. Those Disney remakes, those live action remakes of their animated
My
movies are
take on the Little
terrible.
Mermaid is that is far from the worst one of
It's
those.
not the worst one, but it's definitely not good.
What the heck is Mrs. Santa Claus?
So Mrs. Santa Claus
Okay, let's get into it.
is with Angela Lansbury,
Mrs. Potts.
and Charles Durning plays Santa Claus.
Great casting.
Charles Durning plays Santa Claus. That
Yep.
rules.
Hell yeah. Do you really want me to go into this?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Is it like a biography of Mrs. Claus?
No, I think like essentially,
Hmm.
I haven't seen it since like I was a kid, but like,
Anna Claus.
I think
She
here,
runs the factory.
yeah, she runs the factory for a week, essentially, like
Wow.
neglected by her husband during the pre-Christmas rush.
Oh, this is an
This is-
anti-Santa movie.
Mrs. Claus takes the reindeer and the sleigh out for a drive, only to end up stranded in a multicultural neighborhood of Manhattan's Lower East Side of the early 1900s.
I think they should do a remake of Carnal Knowledge, except two of the characters are Santa and Mrs. Claus.
Oh, you think so? Like, okay, so so Mrs. Claus is the Candace Bergen, or are you putting her in the Jack
I think
character?
Mrs. Claus is the Bobby, and
Oh, okay.
Santa is the Jonathan.
Oh, Jesus. And do you like market it for kids the whole time and then make it like, and then like get all the kids in there and then scare the crap out of them and make them go to therapy for the next 40 years?
And
of their
then
life?
the other couple is Vince Vaughn as Fred Claus and Angela Lansbury.
God damn. Is it Angela
She,
Lansbury?
she's dead. She's
She's
dead.
passed
She's dead. I
away.
want to get to she's dead.
You can't do this
I
to
knew
her.
that one. I knew
You-
that one.
Andrew, this is because Jay didn't know at a certain point that Cormac McCarthy was alive or dead on this podcast. And
I said we needed Counselor 2,
and I'm like,
and,
and he's like, get Cormac to write
which
it. And I'm
remains
like,
which remains true.
we still, oh, you want somebody other than Cormac McCarthy to write that? Who's got the stones to write that movie?
Mm,
Hmm.
Sean Levy.
Oh, for God's sake. All right. Anyway,
Get him in there.
Andrew, I'm so sorry that you had to come on
Oh,
this dumbass show and hang out with
Is
us.
it
But
is it Levy or Levy? What did we decide?
I don't know what it is. I don't.
John Levy?
He's your guy.
Sean Levy.
Okay, thank you very much. All right,
Get him in
Andrew.
there. Counselor 2 starring Ryan Reynolds.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming on.
thanks
Director
for
Watch.
having me.
See how it turns into chaos by the end.
I love it. It's fine.
Can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet, as well as also give our listeners out there a recommendation of the week? Doesn't have to be a new movie, or it can be an old movie, or just something that you've been watching recently that you think everybody should check out.
Sure. So my blog is theawardsconnection.com. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Awards Connect. In terms of discoveries, I guess the most recent film I saw and really loved was The Last Showgirl, which I know
Ooh.
not everybody is fond of, but I thought that Pamela Anderson was just phenomenal in it. And I'm not sure she'll ultimately get a nomination, but I'm certainly rooting for her, and I'm glad she's gotten what she's gotten thus far in terms of recognition. So definitely recommend it.
I know a lot of people are stumping for her to get in there, and I think a lot of people are negative about that movie because they don't like Jamie Lee Curtis, and which is fair. You know, she's a lot to deal with.
That she is.
And in that movie, she's also a lot too. But I think
Yeah.
Anderson's good. I'm not as big a fan as the film, which is, you know, I don't know. Jay, have you seen The Last Showgirl?
Negative.
Okay, I
On
need.
my list.
Yeah, you got to catch up with that. I gotta hear your thoughts on Gia Coppola.
Yeah, we love a Coppola.
Well,
We love one of the other Coppolas. I mean, the thing that you have to mention whenever you're like, oh, another Coppola, Sofia Coppola.
Yeah.
Rules. So maybe
Well,
they got
Roman's
enough
doing good stuff.
Sofia on the roster.
Roman does good
Yeah,
stuff with like
yeah.
Wes Anderson. You know?
Oh well, yeah. As like
Yeah.
yes, for sure.
But like Gia Coppola did that movie with Andrew Garfield, Mainstream. Remember that?
Absolute garbage.
Mm.
So I need your kind of opinion on that because I don't think she's got the juice, but then again, it's not the worst movie to come from that family this year. So because that would be Megalopolis, but
Yeah.
I'd still would be curious to hear what you think about it, Jay. But yeah, it
I got to
is
check
one
it
where
out.
I am excited that Anderson's getting a spotlight,
Apparently,
and
Jamie Lee Curtis going to win an Oscar for it, I guess.
I don't think she's going to win, but she's going to get nominated.
That is so weird.
She's not going to win because Zoe Saldana is still
She could win
around.
SAG. You never know.
She's just going to win. She's
Andrew,
just going to
don't do
happen.
this. Don't
Just saying, if it
don't.
happens, just remember that I put
That
that
you
into
said
the
it.
air.
Do I
Yes.
want to remember that you said that? Do I? We were having such a good time.
Jamie Lee Curtis could do a good Mrs. Claus.
God damn it, Jay! Tell us where we can find you and
All
all the
right.
work on your recommendation.
Letterboxd J Ledbetter, Twitter at Mr. J Ledbetter. Any writing I'm doing over at good old AwardsWatch. Recommendation. I finally got around to A Real Pain, and I thought it was quite good. I do find it kind of
Did he freeze for you too?
He did.
Right when he was doing that, right as we're about to end this episode, Jay, you froze completely when you were
oh
talking
no,
there. Could you
my
could
VPN messed
you
up.
could you just let me feed back into you? All
Okay,
right.
all right.
Jay, your recommendation, where they can find you and all that stuff on the internet, buddy.
Yeah, Letterbox J Ledbetter, Twitter at Mr. J Ledbetter. Any writing I'm doing over at AwardsWatch. Recommendation of the week. I finally got around to A Real Pain, a movie I liked quite a bit. I think it's a movie about like the malleability of empathy. I think it's often funny, often dark, kind of like the kind of movie that I'm a huge fan of. Not something overly huge, but something that is incredibly impactful in a compact kind of way. I do find it baffling that Kieran Culkin is like this runaway winner for supporting actor. I actually
Because
think
he,
Eisenberg is probably the better performance in that
yep,
movie.
Agreed.
great,
Agreed.
agreed. Yeah.
Um, Also, he's a lead,
Mm-hmm.
a
Thank
co-lead,
you. Thank
but
you.
I guess people like Succession.
They
Yeah.
really do. Because that's why Jeremy Strong's might get in too for The Apprentice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet Sarah Snook doesn't have a movie out. She
The
could be.
Apprentice, that's a movie. I don't know what y'all think of that movie. I think that movie is going to be embarrassing to look back on in like 5 years.
I think it's going to look embarrassing next year.
Yeah, it's
6
possible.
months, 3 months. It
Does a pretty good Trump impression though.
does he? I don't think he's that good in the movie.
I do not think that movie is good at all.
I think Strong
think-
is actually the best part of the movie.
I think Maria Bakalova.
Oh,
is
you
the
think
best
she's the
performance in
best
it.
part of that thing?
I think she gives the most understated and least caricature performance. Although I
Knew
think I
that
liked the
Borat's
movie more
daughter
than
would
you
get
did.
there.
Yeah.
Mm.
I did. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the film either, Jay. But I think the only reason to watch it, for my opinion, was Strong because he's just very committed. He's a very committed actor, and I like what he's doing there. But the movie itself, like, yeah, it's the Vice movie felt even too soon after when they did that for Cheney, but yet there was at least interesting things that they were doing in that movie. It feels weirdly safe for a Donald Trump movie. And
It also feels like a movie that very clearly was actively trying to influence the world.
yeah, like it wasn't trying to, no, but then it was also like trying not to piss anybody off. Like it really is without thorns, which is
Mm.
kind of safe. And so that way it goes back
And I
to your,
definitely think it has a
it
point
doesn't
of
have a,
view about Donald Trump, the man.
Yeah. well, that he's manipulated by Roy Cohn and he's a product of this guy and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't think it's
a Jack Nicholson, Art Garfunkel situation.
I think so. Yeah, that's for sure. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterbox, Blue Sky at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find out my work at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, We have the Awards Watch podcast that's up every Monday, iTunes and Spotify, 5 stars. We greatly appreciate it. While you're on the website, please sign up for the newsletter. It's the best place to get all of our news, reviews, interviews, and podcasts sent to you all in one place. I think I might have mentioned this movie. I don't know if I have before. Jay, correct me if I'm wrong if I have. But I rewatched it on last week, and it completely opened up even more. So if I have mentioned this already this season, I do apologize, but it's one of the best movies of the year. So I'm going to reiterate Mike Leigh's Hard Truths. I believe I recommended it. I might have recommended it before. This movie completely opened up more the second go round. Marianne Jean-Baptiste, if there is a right God in this world, she would win the Oscar for Best Actress. She's incredible in this movie. Jay, you have to see this thing.
I need to see that one. Yeah,
and
that's
I'm making
need to see.
I'm making a declaration. We have to do a Mike Leigh series at a certain point on this podcast. The way he makes films is unlike anybody. And I was able to be at a Q&A moderated by Barry Jenkins with Mike Leigh and Michelle Austin and Marianne Jean-Baptiste. And the talk about how they build a screenplay and the process that Leigh goes, because he's very improvisational in terms of they don't show up with a script and they kind of build it out all together through workshops and rehearsals and everything. And then when they go to the set, they have a script built from those rehearsals. So they build the characters inside and out, and then put it all on the page and show up, for a couple weeks. And it's just 3 weeks of shooting, and then bam, you got a movie. Some of the most fascinating stuff. And then you watch the film, deeply layered, deeply complex, at times much like A Real Pain, very hilarious, but then extremely heartbreaking. And just the duality of Marianne Jean-Baptiste Pansy and what she's going through, and the idea of grief, and the idea of, being lost in the world without a purpose, not being, to relate to those around you, even if those people are your family. Very, very good movie by Mike Leigh, who's a man in his 80s and still's got the juice. He's killing it. I wish he would just now make movies with Marianne Jean-Baptiste, because those are the best movies ever.
Talk about somebody who was done dirty.
Yeah. Who?
Marianne Jean-Baptiste.
Oh, you think this year or just in general?
Just in general.
Oh, okay.
The last 30 years.
Yeah. No, for sure. She's incredible in Secrets and Lies. And then she's once again incredible in this movie. So
she does play General Manager June in Peter Rabbit.
Well, there you go. But highly recommend. Andrew, have you seen Hard Truths yet?
Not yet. It just opened here in Boston, so I'll probably see it this weekend.
You got to go check it out. Jay, I know you haven't seen it yet either, but I know that you like a Mike Leigh movie as well. And it's one of those, once you watch it, you're like, yeah, I get it. I get why everybody's obsessing over this thing. It's one of those, I hope she does get in. I wish
we putting you on the spot. She going to get in?
I think she is, but it's the margins are very thin. By the time we release this, we'll know, and I'll be either very right or very wrong. But we still don't know yet. The nominations.
Andrew, on the record,
I think she gets snubbed.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for.
He's
probably.
If it were a Sony Pictures classic, I would predict her. But
yeah, that's the thing.
Street.
That's the thing, Jay. It's part of the Bleecker Street gang.
You got to make room for Jamie Lee Curtis.
Well, they'll be in different categories. There'll be different categories. No, most likely would probably be Fernando Torres.
Yes.
But man, if both Torres and Marianne Jean-Baptiste got in, like I kind of wildly predicted on our final episode for final predictions, if that happens, we're living in a good world. Obviously we'd still have some other films nominated, but whatever.
Marianne Jean-Baptiste, speaking of Mrs. Claus, plays Ruth Kringle in the Mel Gibson Santa Claus action movie Fat Man.
Wow.
This is why we have you here, to read stupid facts like that. Thank you.
The film is an unorthodox slant on holiday traditions that follows a jaded, gritty Santa Claus who struggles with ennui. What a weird description of a movie.
It
Struggles with ennui.
I feel like that's how I get through this podcast every single week, is struggling through ennui with you. Next week, we will be back continuing our Mike Nichols movie series. We will be talking about Silkwood. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.